Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk today, and thank you so much to Webflow for inviting me here to talk a little bit about my experiences. Today, I'll let you know a little bit about who I am, like why am I up here talking to you. I do have a really long history in this space, and I've really seen how it's evolved over the last 20-something years. So I'm excited to share what I've witnessed, but also where I feel it's going, and how Webflow fits into all of that. So first, a little bit about who I am. I'm Liz Branzani. I'm the Chief Technology Officer from a digital agency called Verndale. I've been with Verndale since 2001. So that's actually closer to 23, 24 years. And as a CTO, at Verndale specifically, I really focus on a few different areas. The areas I focus on are sort of our technical delivery excellence. So anything that happens technically at Verndale, I'm basically responsible for. Also, where is technology going, especially in the web space, because I need to stay ahead of that for our clients to make sure we're taking advantage of everything that's evolving so that they can stay ahead of it as well. And then finally, I'm also on our executive team. So I spend a lot of time focusing on business strategy and where that needs to go. So talking a little bit about Verndale. Who is Verndale? Verndale is a digital experience agency. We're also implementation partner of many DXP and CMS platforms. We're uber focused on business outcomes. We've sort of tried to change our mentality from being focused on activities and deliverables to actually business outcomes, right? Instead of just saying, hey, you're going to buy this set of activities from us, we want to make sure that our customers and our clients are actually achieving the outcomes that are going to drive positive ROI for their businesses. And especially as we move into more of this digital age, we still want to have human connections, right? We still want to make sure our clients have human connections. We are very focused on 3 different areas of expertises or practices. One is digital experience platforms, another is commerce, and we also have a Salesforce practice. So our full service spans not only technology and development, but also strategy, business strategy, marketing services, design, quality assurance, managed services. It's full end-to-end. These are a few of our clients. Personally, some of my favorite brands on here that I've been able to work with over time. My roots are in development. I've worn every technical hat. Some of these I've personally worked on. But you can see it ranges many different verticals: financial services, higher ed, professional services, law, retail, healthcare, hospitality, manufacturing, distribution, even sports and venues. That's a big part of our Salesforce practice. I think this slide is kind of interesting. I put this together to kind of show the journey we've been on from a CMS and a DXP. Every single one of these commerce and CMS platforms you see up here, we've spent significant time with over the years. And some of them we still have a very strong a strategic relationship with, right? Sitecore and Optimizely and Salesforce are some of our biggest strategic partners. So, you know, this was actually a little terrifying when I actually put this all together to see all of these platforms that we've worked with. What I think is really important, though, is where it's going, right? Where you see where we're going in 2023 when we first sort of found Webflow, and how that now, and what sort of Webflow's mantra is, has become a key part of our business strategy. So why is that? I think simply put, I think Webflow strategy is absolutely the future. You know, even working with all those platforms, I think this strategy is the future. When I had a client, is actually how I found out, and they said, you know what, hey, we're leaving this CMS platform, we're going to go to Webflow. And I was like, huh? What's Webflow, right? I immediately started looking it up, and I was like, it was not too long after ChatGPT kind of blew up, and I just started to have these realizations. Like, I was just floored, and immediately I had initiatives set up so that we could start understanding what Webflow is. I immediately got our VP of Partner and Alliances to contact and get in touch with Juan. I was like, oh my gosh, we need to know what this is. We need to be involved in this because I think this is the future. And I think, you know, a lot of different organizations and businesses, the DXPs are starting to realize it as well. And this is a sort of a best kept secret that everyone here probably knows about, but it's not just for sort of these edge cases, right? It can do so much more. So I want to take a quick step back and just talk about CMS, DXP, what is sort of this evolution that's come about? Like, how did we get here? So going back 15 or 20 years, it was just CMS, right? And what happened is the CMS was just focused on content. It was focused on one channel, a website, right? And it did one thing well, and it really didn't like try to serve other channels. And what started to happen is they were competing with each other. And in order to compete, they started adding all these features in, right? They started adding a customer data platform. Okay, now we have marketing automation. Hey, we need to have a media library where we can put all our digital assets, right? They started adding all these features in. It's got testing, it's got personalization. Well, the problem is now you've got this massive bloated code base that did all of these things. Not to mention your website was actually wrapped up, the delivery mechanism was wrapped up inside of it. And now to do anything was very difficult. It was bloated, monolithic, upgrades delayed everything, right? And so the DXP, though, tried to claim to be everything, right? We're going to serve multiple channels, and we're going to do all of these great features, which we're kind of not great at. We're not the masters of anything anymore. And that's how DXP originally started, with some of that competition, but there was a problem. And the problem was that it was not agile and it was not fast, and everything was bogged down with technical debt and other problems. You could implement it, but if you implemented it wrong, just forget about it. It's going to take forever to do anything. And then what happened is during the COVID pandemic, suddenly overnight, literally everything was online, and any digital laggards were having a serious problem in keeping up. And the folks that were already on the DXPs realized, we still can't get anything done. We're paying all this money for these licenses, and we still can't get anything done. And so they realized they needed to start to make their ecosystems and their suite of products, instead of being a big monolith, they need to make it more composable. They'd actually started a little bit already, but what they basically started to do is they looked at it and said, what are all the features that we added that really shouldn't be in this big monolith? And let's go acquire a company. And that's what they did. They made 5 or 6 different acquisitions to bring in a new CDP, a personalization platform, a testing platform, a DAM, a CMP. They just started making all these acquisitions all over the place. And they started to say, we're going to loosely bring these together into a composable architecture. So at Verndale, we said, we need to know, we want to define aspirationally what a DXP should actually be. And so we kind of came up with this definition that essentially said, look, a DXP has to basically, it's sort of got a little bit of that mock element to it, the mock alliance. But basically, it's going to be a set of loosely coupled services. It's going to have certain types of product within it, and it's got to deliver on sort of this customer experience message. And so we also decided what has to be inside of a DXP? What are the exact products that we think make it a DXP if it's going to be a DXP? And this is what we basically came up with, what it must have, what it might have, what it's going to connect to. And so customer data platform, digital asset management, it's got to have experimentation and testing, it's got to have personalization, it's got to have great APIs for interconnecting. And that's what we basically came up with. But what's kind of interesting, I think, is this is even changing, and I'm probably going to have to update this slide when we talk to clients, because I think especially what's in the may have column, which is like AI, as well as low code, no code, I think those things need to move into must have. Existentially, it's what needs to exist. So if you take all of that, you can basically bucket CMS platforms into 4 sort of pillars or buckets, right? You've got DXP, which I've already talked a bit about what that is. Then you've got open source, right? No licensing. It's supposed to be cheap, but is cheap really cheap? There's limited support, so you're going to pay someone somewhere for the services that you're going to get. Also, I think what we've seen recently in the news is you also run the risk of some folks who are leading up those open source platforms deciding that they're going to take their stuff and close it all down and no longer make it available to people. So, so would you really want to tie up your digital investment on a platform like that? And then there's headless. Headless is where you basically separate your administrative function tools from the delivery of your actual website experience. That is very flexible, but it's not necessarily easy or cheap. It's actually pretty complex. You're managing all of those different vendors. And honestly, a pure headless lacks a delivery system. It doesn't define presentation. And so what you end up with is your developers kind of still running the show on those particular types of platforms. And then you've got low-code, no-code, right? Low-code, no-code traditionally had been, sort of your Wix and your Squarespaces of the world. Very, very limited in terms of creativity and what you can do from a design perspective. But, it was fast, it was easy, it was cheap. And I think this is where Webflow kind of is revolutionizing that whole concept, because now you're not sacrificing any of that anymore. You're actually able to get the exact experiences that you want and still have the low code, no code. I mean, my front-end developers dove into that code. They were sure they were going to uncover some bodies, and they loved it. They actually loved the quality of the code in there. So knowing all of this, what's the future? What's the future of digital experiences? So basically, in my opinion, you've got sort of this environment where it's a SaaS environment, right? You are essentially going to have AI threaded throughout everything. Upgrades should be a thing of the past. You're going to be really focused on customer data and testing and personalization. And really, you're putting more power into the hands of your businesses and marketing teams rather than it being in the hands of developers. And I really do think that that is going to be the future. Any of those platforms that we saw up there have to get there. It's just a matter of how long are they going to take to actually get there. Why? Why is this the future? This is the future because our clients, they're tired, right? They don't want to be dealing with this anymore. They've been spending money on licenses for decades, getting a promise of this vision of what you can eventually get to, but they don't get there, right? They're spending their money on technical debt and deployments and upgrades and replatforms and redesigns, and they're never where they want to be, where they can actually start using these things for marketing services and coming up with business outcomes. And they're saying to us, they're like, what do we do? I mean, I can't tell you how many different clients in the last 2 years have come to us and said, am I in the right platform? Because I'm spending a lot of money and I'm still not getting there. And then they say, hey, what is this Webflow? Like, what is this all about, right? And so I think that is something where, Webflow starts to unlock that real value. It skips all of that other crap, right? And gets you to the value that you need to get to. And I think what's really interesting, and it came out a lot in the keynote today, is that there's too much manual intervention. And everyone's obsessed, right? We go through these massive UAT and QA periods where the client's like, the pixels are wrong. There's not enough padding. There's not enough space. You have the wrong thing over there. And it's like, what is that based on? Says who? Like, you're not taking that from data. It's the opinion of one designer or one marketing person. Like, that's not based on anything that's important. And so the question that I've really started to, talk about, and we've talked about internally at my company, is like, what really matters, right? Ultimately, what matters? What are you trying to do with your website, right? You want the user to convert on some sort of goal that's going to ladder up to a business objective. Maybe that's buying something, maybe that's filling out a form. Like, that's all that matters. And that's what I really loved about what we heard about in the keynote, right? About the AI assistants, right? And what IntelliMize can do is because that actually ladders up to this idea that we don't need to be like obsessive about the experience, right? The design shouldn't be about pixel perfect, and the code shouldn't be about how is it organized, what language is it in, who cares, right? It doesn't matter. What really matters is that The code is maintainable and accessible and performant and secure. Ultimately, after that, it doesn't really matter. So as long as it's doing that and the user experience is fantastic to perform those conversions, that's the only thing that really, really matters. So we need a new platform that's going to be quick to learn and quick for people to understand how to use, which automates a lot of things, right? And what I'm seeing is that a platform like Webflow literally has all of that, right? And it has it right now. It's not like a visionary thing that we learned about where it was like, in like 7 months we're going to get there maybe. It's so many of the things we heard about is actually happening right now, which is really, really exciting, right? And clients are ready for that. I think they're really starting to see that, and they're really starting to let go of sort of that need, that control need of like exactly what it's going to be. I think low-code platforms make this possible. So Webflow, where does Webflow fit into all of this? So it's so interesting that it was emphasized about WXP earlier because I had put this together to say, well, what is the difference between a DXP, which we've already defined, and a WXP? So WXP being a website experience platform, right? So I think the key piece that makes this real is this idea of Webflow Optimize, right? And it was born from that IntelliMize acquisition. The fact that it enables personalization and testing really shows where WXP is focused, right? It's still website focused, right? That's still the primary channel it's focused on. But it's also bringing in some of those features from DXP that actually really, really help with a website, right? So you've got a couple of those aspects, but it's not pretending to be everything, right? And you can still integrate with some of those other platforms. You can integrate with any of those. I don't know if anyone went to the app session, but you can integrate with any of those platforms and still get a best-of-breed DXP environment, just with Webflow handling the most important pieces around website delivery, and now website optimization. And so I think what we see is a little bit of a convergence, and it's not going to be overlapping per se, like exactly the same, but we can see that Webflow is transforming to allow some more customization, right? Some of the things that were sort of standard in DXP, I'm seeing Webflow announced last year, announced this year with translations, with DevLink allowing some more of the customizations. I think all of that is giving it some of those DXP aspects that are really relevant to the customer base. And then DXP is, it's funny, like, I don't know that they had heard of Webflow necessarily, and suddenly I'm starting to see it pop up in sort of competitor analysis slides and things of that nature, right? So they're catching on, and they're catching on that low-code, no-code has to be something that they're doing. Absolutely has to be. And it's going to be existential for them if they don't get there. But the question is, how, are they going to prioritize it? Because honestly, they're years behind. I can tell you from my own experience, they're years behind where Webflow is right now. So I kind of, when AI kind of blew up in early 2023, I had sort of this vision of where that I thought it was all going, right? This AI-driven thing that's not static, and it's not necessarily precise, and it's organic. It's living and breathing. Like the website becomes a living and breathing thing. And I kind of looked at the whole sort of website delivery process and said, what's going to happen? And I said, I think what's going to happen is you're going to feed in data, right? Data about your vertical or your industry. You're going to feed in data about your brand, your styling, things of that nature. You're going to click a button, and it's going to basically say, this is what I think your sitemap should be. And for your sitemap, this is what I think that your web pages are going to be. And for those web pages, now I know your style. I'm going to generate a bunch of designs, and you're going to tell me which one you like. And then I'll generate a bunch more with the one you like. And then from there, I'm going to generate the code, and I'm going to generate the images, and I'm going to generate the content. And like the whole way, you're still going to be able to go in and like tweak it, change it, modify it, nudge it. And then from there, it's going to auto-deploy, and you're not going to have someone spending a whole weekend deploying the site. And And then it's going to iterate, right? And then I'm like, oh, experimentation will come in, And so you'll have different variations, and it'll sort of try a whole bunch of iterations and figure out what kind of works and just automatically deploy it again. And then it'll give you reports, though, and let you know how it's doing, right? So that way you can go in and keep track of it, make sure it didn't roll out something super bizarre. And I was like, yeah, that's going to be the future, and it's going to be in like 5 years. And I'm like, that's going to be really, really cool, and I think this is where it's going. And then over the last few months, I've realized, and I would even update this now with what we heard earlier, but like all those yellow boxes are all the things that either Webflow or partners with Webflow actually already deliver, if you sort of stitch them all together. I got a couple in there that we leverage at Verndale, Stories on Board and Test Sigma, to sort of fill in some of the gaps around user stories and things of that nature. But like all the rest that you see up there is actually already there with Webflow. And the one thing that I was like, oh, I don't really have an option yet for how do you have the design system and like apply design to, because we're using Reloom right now to actually help bring together our, using AI to bring together what our pages should look like. And then I heard today about the AI assistant that's going to do all of that in Webflow, and I'm sure it's like baby steps. It's like getting there, but like the future that I'm like, oh, it's 4 or 5 years away. I'm like, it literally is right now already with Webflow and all of the partners there, right? And so I think that it's super, super exciting. And I think that, Verndale, we're really excited to see where it's going. It's like a big change, a sort of big mental change for us, and we're still heavily involved, with our strategic partners, but like we're really super excited about Webflow. And I think it's sort of an existential change for us. But we're excited about it, and we honestly can't wait to see where it goes next and how Webflow will continue to innovate to stay ahead of it. That's what I got. Does anyone have any questions about all of that?
Hey, Liz, I think we know each other.
Yes.
Verndale's partner manager. So I think one of the things that I'm really interested about is how does low-code and AI actually change the role of the developer? Because you talked about your front-end developers leaning into this technology,
yeah,
which is actually counterintuitive to what you would think, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you would think, I thought for sure, we started using GitHub Copilot to do code gen, and there was some resistance. There definitely was some, everyone got a little bit scared. And then they started using it, and then they realized, oh, I'm just doing the things that I don't feel like Googling and figuring out. Like, I'm just getting that stuff over with so I can get to the cool stuff. So I can get to, either the business user logic, or I can get to some really cool animations that I would never have figured out before. And also, to build the experiences in Webflow well, you actually really need to have a good understanding of front-end developer technologies, CSS, JavaScript, all of that. Like, you need to understand it really, really well. And what we've found is that, like, they're fantastic at doing it. They're probably the fastest people at our company in doing it, and they actually love the platform, right? And as for developers that are not front-end, you still have to, you're still creating, like serving the enterprise, we're still building tons of integrations. We're still moving data, bringing in data, right? And so there's a lot of iPaaS work that we have to do. So whether that's using MuleSoft or whether that's using Workato or something, you're still doing a lot of logic. You're using serverless functions on the edge in order to code business logic, right? So all of that stuff still has to exist. So there's still plenty of work for both front-end and back-end developers. And I think like after the initial scare, they all kind of realized that. And so there's also apps, right? If anyone attended the app session, like there's apps that can be built to sort of bolt on to some of these platforms. So there's still plenty of work for developers, in my opinion.
Hi, Liz. Yannick here. I'm the founder of Shadow.
Hi, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. I love your comparison to larger DXPs. I feel like oftentimes when we're comparing it to other platforms, it's smaller platforms or open source like WordPress. So I love that, hearing that Webflow comes up in those conversations. My question is separate from that. You mentioned AI during the development process and how it changes and how you can kind of nudge it. How do you see AI playing a role in the user experience when they come on a website? I don't know if you saw what Edgar Allan did with their website, where it's basically all just prompting and you're kind of like
Yes.
going through an interactive experience. How do you see the experience for the actual website visitors changing?
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. It actually has come up a lot with search, especially like on-site search, not even just like off-site search, but on-site search. There's actually a really cool platform. It's called AI 1 to Z. It's the founder of that is actually the guy who founded Ektron. And so we have a relationship because we're one of the first Ektron partners way back in the day. And they've got a really cool product, which not only brings like a RAG AI search to the table, but also allows for these really cool agents or co-pilots to be added, where you basically can set up different types of it's basically different types of web service connections specifically for that. And what it does is it'll go out and like connect to your CRM and get some user data. And it will even prompt the user being like, hey, what's your email address? I'll get you more information about that, right? And then it will actually call out and get that information for the user and then use that information to sort of now do additional AI sort of generation of content. And so what we see is, I mean, the search experience is going to change completely. And Bill, who's the CEO, his vision is that the whole website just becomes a series of like different types of these agents where it's a little bit, it's not asking for too much information, just exactly what it needs. And so suddenly, it kind of combines with the personalization that you might have to actually give something that isn't just based on behavior on the website, but actually real data behind the scenes. So we're super excited about that particular platform and where we might be able to leverage that. And I do think it's gonna change that whole experience as well.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Uh-oh. Question for the big man.
Kind of a selfish question. You've mentioned this gradient between CMSs to the WXP in the middle to DXPs.
Yeah.
What advice would you give us as we add more things that you kind of said that eventually you add more and more that are in this like must-have column? What advice would you give us, seeing that no other platform has really been able to crack doing this well? Like when would you consider from as a partner to companies and understanding like larger companies' needs, what would your recommendation be for like when to introduce new things to a platform and doing it in a way that doesn't lead to this like bloated all-in-one solution?
I think first and foremost, from an infrastructure perspective, the way that you should be doing it is definitely keeping it sort of separated SaaS microservices, right? Like, don't let it bog down where you can't make a release because you're waiting on something else that's already rolling out, right? So that, I think, is probably the most important thing. But I think otherwise, it's doing what you're doing right now with like understanding what's the channel you're focused on, right? And I think I had said up there, like one of my open questions was, will it be, probably the biggest thing that I think that seems missing, right, is multiple channels, like sort of that omni-channel approach of like, you've already got a CMS, right? You've got APIs. Maybe you don't have a graph interface yet, but it would be probably a small level of effort, relatively small, to start to be able to serve up other channels and make those available. What you would just want to make sure is that like you don't then get too bogged down in all of that and forget like your roots in the website, because I still truly believe that like, look, I've been doing this for 23 years and everyone keeps saying other channels are going to be more important. And so far the website is still like 90% of our work, right? So like you can keep talking about all these other channels, but like the website is still primary. So just as long as you got most of your effort on that piece and not spreading it too wide across everything else, and just keeping an eye on where things are going. That agile approach of what you're adding, I think, is the most important thing. All right, well, thank you, everybody.